Okay, I'm recording now. Okay, so I'm Michael Weber. I am the defendant of this case from 2019, and it is okay if I record this?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, so the date is Tuesday, February 17th, and so I reached out to the district attorney's office. I'm sorry, could you state your name?
Gary
Price. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to be formal about this, not in a, I'm trying to make sure, trying to do the right things, right? And you're a private investigator yourself. You have a lot of experience doing this.
Yeah. I'm actually not a private investigator.
Oh, really?
No, sir. I work for the district attorney.
Okay, so you
just
are
part of the office.
Okay.
Yes.
So you work for the DA's office,
Mm-hmm.
and you're authorized to talk about this case with me.
As much as possible.
Okay. This is new for me. I'm a veteran,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm learning this whole process myself. And I'm an advocate for veterans and their families in the communities. And I was receiving care from the VA in 2019. I've been receiving care from the VA since 2008, right when I got out of the military. Pretty much transitioned from military and then straight into the VA system, like you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was receiving care ever since then. Ups and downs, as you can expect. Are you a veteran yourself?
No, sir. I'm not.
You're familiar with veterans, I'm sure, with the
yes.
law enforcement, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be a transitional period, and I think it's evolving to the point ultimately where now they have vet court.
Yes.
And anyways, my purpose to reaching out is I experienced some potential risks, safety risks to the public during my experience, particularly 2019 moving forward, with the way the case was handled. And some of that, I think it's failures in the VA system, management with managing medications. If you're going to be medicating veterans and putting them out there in the community, you should hold them accountable. You should be managing their medications appropriately. I think the doctor in my case failed horribly, which is why I ended up in jail, right? So it ended up being with this domestic, and I'll leave the victims' names out of the recording just in case, I do end up trying to publish any of this or whatever for documentation purposes. I'm trying to help people, and I don't want to blame you or the system, like the DA or my attorney. Like it's a complex system, as you're aware, and it's gonna have faults. And the point is, sorry, I have my ears plugged.
It's okay.
So I had some issues. I think that a lot of people were negligent. I feel like the district attorney prosecuting the case was perhaps a little negligent in the case as well, as far as cutting a plea deal on me and not putting me in prison. Is that a weird thing for me to say?
That's different from normal. Yes.
Because if you look at my record, I feel like I should have done some kind of prison time. The court order was, let me just read this statement quick. So the officer, let's see, at approximately, Sunday, June 16th, approximately 0100 hours, Officer blank, I'm not gonna say his name, responded to the residence for a domestic matter involving verbal threats of suicide. Upon arrival, the victim stated that her husband had been having a mental breakdown the past few days. So she had observed me for the past few days having a mental breakdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up until the point where it ended up in a domestic incident. I have a hard time remembering everything that happened. I was so medicated on the VA meds.
Yes.
But it happened, you know. So it ended up to that point, you know, and then husband repeatedly asked, you know, the victim to stab him, and then when law enforcement arrived, I'm paraphrasing, he asked law enforcement to put a bullet in him, you know, more suicidal stuff. Taken to UT Medical, cleared for arrest. It was considered a felony domestic incident. So, anyways, I feel like the doctors in that case, that's where things really got messed up. And I feel like the district attorney and my defense attorney, I've already talked to them, and I did this same thing, and I told them that I felt like they were negligent. They failed to look at the evidence, look at the medical evidence and the arrest history of the person, the defendant, me, and really see what was the problem. It was just it was like it's hard to explain, but it was like people just wanted to get the charge and get me back out there on the streets. You know what I mean? It was like plea deal. It pleaded down to you know, misdemeanor eventually. But some of the things, I'm all over the place right now, but some of the issues I had were with my defense attorney was that they were allowed to talk to the victim without court approval. Is that a thing?
It is. A defense attorney, a defense investigator can talk to whoever they want to that's a witness or victim. They're allowed to do that technically on your behalf, you know, to give you the best defense that they can. The individual does not have to talk to them, but they have the right and the opportunity to go try to talk to the people.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what he said too. I think that's an issue personally, but I'm not a lawyer. But I feel like that can be intimidation factors, you know what I mean? And like you said, they don't have to. But in this case, I felt like a domestic violence victim being represented by a defense attorney or a defense attorney reaching out to one, it could be without going through the proper channels and filing through the courts, you know. I feel like, how is that fair? I don't know. Anyways, that was one of the issues I had with that. But I understand it's apparently legal. Fair enough. I think that law should be changed. How about you? You know, like as far as filing paperwork through the judge to be authorized to talk to a domestic violence victim.
You know, that is something that and of course, when you look at that, you're not, from a systemic standpoint, you're not looking only at domestic violence, because that's across the board, depending on whatever type of offense it is. So I don't know that realistically you could make an application that would fit everything.
Sure.
Of course, the bottom line is if you know, if the state legislature passed a statute that was constitutional, that passed constitutional muster, then everybody would have to abide by it at that point.
You know, I think like, because if there's, you know, if I had a do not contact order, you know what I mean? It just seems, I get the right, if you're in trial in front of a judge, you can request to question a witness, right? You know, because otherwise my lawyer brought up a good point, like, well, people make false allegations all the time, you know what I mean? Blah, 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 blah. But I feel like in real domestic violence cases, it's definitely, it can be intimidating, but I don't know. But I get what you're saying. All right, so let's stick to me then and say, like, do you think Are you familiar with this case?
No.
Okay.
No, and I couldn't really,
Would you like to take a look?
give you like specifics, like I told you on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's done, and I'm not an attorney, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as decisions they make or things they do, I couldn't comment specifically on is this
Mm-hmm.
right, is this wrong.
So you're sorry.
I'm
to interrupt.
basically here to kind of listen
Okay,
to you
and
get your concerns.
and relay to the district attorney.
Mhm.
Very well. I mean, okay. I don't know if okay. So one of my biggest issues is the VA care, right?
Mhm.
They failed big time, which why they were operating recklessly in the Knoxville community. And they ignored repeated signs of side effects and tried to counteract side effects and ignored reported, I have documents too that reported issues along the way. Doctors log it, and he kept over-prescribing meds, controlled meds too, like amphetamines and antipsychotics, completely contradicting one another, over and over and over again, to the point where it ended up like this. When I was in jail, Dr. Simpson, he retired. He pretty much knew he was screwed. Like, I'm not going down for this, right? Or he's gonna run for it. He retired. I was assigned to a new doctor when I got out of jail. But me at the time, I didn't know what was going on. I was a scared veteran.
Mhm.
I just hurt the person I love. My daughter was almost murdered, like my whole family, everything I care about was almost gone in the blink of an eye, I felt like I didn't deserve to be alive, I felt like it was just all my fault, right? I didn't realize that it was a bigger problem. I was going off of what the doctors said, that, medication is the way. And that's how I ended up like that, right?
Yes, sir.
So I brought this up to my attorney at the time, and I told Garza the exact same thing. I said, I don't remember. I was medicated. I was blacking in and out, right?
Yes.
So what are protocols that you guys have in place? That's my concern is what happened after I got out and got the plea deal. I was part of the process the plea deal was to go back into the care of the VA and receive care, right? And more, to me, more things happen that are a danger to not just public safety, but national security safety, because at the time I wasn't aware, and I went back into the VA. I was receiving care. They started adjusting the meds. They got rid of the amphetamines, and they adjusted the dosages of the venlafaxine and added some other stuff, right? Antipsychotic stuff. I ended up at one point blacking out. And this is after the plea deal and everything. I blacked out, and I drove up to the Midwest, and I ended up on a Navy base, and I could have killed a platoon of new recruits. I was arrested for parking in a no parking zone, but I drove across 4 or 5 different states in a blackout stupor, high on meds from the VA, right? So to me, that was another big issue where I think the district attorney's office failed to protect the citizens by releasing someone that was, back into a system that was abusing people. You know what I mean? And I don't know. To me, that's my biggest issue I have. It's supposed to be like an aha moment, like, yeah, but realistically, to me, that was the biggest threat, was that so many people overlooked the facts, the records. If they had done their jobs, not just the district attorney, but my attorney, and they investigated the VA and looked up my records, and they would have seen, okay, maybe we shouldn't order him to go back into the VA and get treatment. That was part of my agreement, go back to the VA and resume treatment. That to me, that's, now I say it in a, I don't know, who knows how many people I could have killed driving in a blackout stupor on that Navy base, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about all that? You know, as a district attorney, like, do you think anything was wrong on the district attorney's end, based off of like those facts, right?
Right. All right. Well,
I mean, it's hard for you to say.
I really couldn't say. Obviously, the emphasis or the focus would be making
Right.
sure everybody involved is as safe as possible
Right.
on things, and that folks are getting the help they need, or at least the attempt to do that.
Right.
With folks. I don't even know, because I'm not familiar with the history of the drug court. Was it around at that time?
I'm not sure. Vet court's been around for a long time, and no one's ever actually told me if I'm in vet court or not. Mm-hmm. You know, and that was always that thing where veterans could have a potential chance to expunge anything that happened based off of vet court, right? Mm-hmm. But as far as I'm aware, I was never a part of vet court. I know it's a thing, right? But either way, it was a big enough issue where the VA. Okay, so here, I'm sorry, I'm not firing on all cylinders. I just got vaccinated and all that stuff, and I'm recovering.
Not a problem.
You know, I would like to backtrack. We got released, and I would honestly like you to relay this to the DA. You know, I do plan on filing a complaint, a formal complaint. But so when I was released, part of the terms were go back into the VA system, do not cause fear or harm to the victim, resume treatment at the VA system, stay out of trouble. So we did that, and the VA brought me and my wife in as the victim, and they started pressuring us or encouraging us back into like intimate relationships after this horrible domestic incident. Now, to me, that is another big red flag on the VA system side, but something that prosecutors should be aware of. You know, if you come across another veteran family in this situation, you know, it's something to consider, because it was very dangerous and reckless. You know, the victim, and I don't know exactly. We ended up getting a divorce. Long story short, you know, I felt she's finally had enough or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that was another issue I had. But a big one too was the Navy base, you know. So I feel like where the DA could have, and this sounds stupid, and I feel stupid saying it, like I felt like she should have put me in prison for a little while. It would have stopped the abuse on everybody, my entire family. You know what I mean? And it would have prevented the incident on the Navy base, you know. And a lot of other stuff. So I don't know. I guess what I'm asking for is what are the protocols in place, or has anything changed since 2019, 2020 to prevent these things from happening?
You know, and specifically, I couldn't point to one thing or another, but you're always looking at the system, and you're looking at the individual cases as well, just in general, to see what might be most appropriate on the thing. So, you know, I would say it is a constant evolution as far as the way things are handled, the way things are looked at, just general experience on the way things go.
Is it a forgiveness for the system being faulty, kind of, in a way? You know, where case-by-case basis?
Well, you know, every case truly is different. The specifics are different. The dynamics are different, and what you're seeing and what you're doing. I think the ultimate goal again is kind of what you've already said, and that is the safety of everybody involved as much as possible. And you know, in the real world, that only goes so far in what you can do and what happens as a result of it, and to hold some accountability as well.
Yes.
But every time, you know, it's a balance.
Yeah, I agree with you. And legally, you know, that they're always changing laws to protect people because.
Right. Well, and
but
there
it feels
are
like they're
also parameters as far as, you know, guidelines in terms of, okay, if this is this, then what can we do? If this is this, then what can we do? Or what are we allowed to do? What type of probation can be given?
Right.
You know, those types of things.
You know, at the time, I would you know, obviously I didn't want to go to prison. Like I said, I was scared. I didn't know what happened. I was still foggy. But when I look back on it, you know, if I could have saved the recruits, all the Navy base operations, you know, if I could have prevented all that stuff from happening, and if I could have prevented more abuse on my wife and my daughter from the VA system, I would have gladly, I'll look back, I'll go to jail right now, today, to prevent all that. You know, I'm clearer minded. It was after the Navy base where I think people were like, they knew something was seriously wrong, right? And a lot of it was the meds, reckless management and prescribing of the meds. So I think my biggest concern, this is supposed to be also empowering, I think, for someone like me to kind of be like, okay, let's see how we can help change the system or push back and see, like, you know, to try and prevent some of this stuff from happening. I mean, almost worst case scenario, you know, I could have been classified as a terrorist, and in some cases I might be on a terrorist watch list after the Navy base, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you don't just crash into a military installation and do all those things. You know, I mean, I don't know. This is such a frustrating moment because it's like, who's to blame? But I feel like everybody's already kind of distanced themselves and time has naturally passed. And how do I proceed as far as making sure this doesn't happen to someone else, right? Or a worst case scenario where someone's family gets murdered because the district attorney, who's supposed to be looking out for the people and the families and the victims, didn't actually look at the evidence, or you know, if the district attorney looked at the evidence, and if my attorney looked at the evidence and actually looked at it, instead of going through the motions of the everyday court life, right? Paperwork, judge. It's like on automation. Have you ever watched a courtroom? I'm sure you have.
Yes.
It's just automated almost. It's like clockwork. And if they had actually looked at the evidence, they would have seen that something was seriously wrong, and they probably shouldn't have ordered me to go back into treatment to the place that was abusing and neglecting me and my family, you know what I mean? So what would you suggest be changed in that case, in that situation? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, honestly, I do not know.
That's fair. I don't even know, right? I mean, well, other than actually, instead of pushing and rushing through, actually figuring out why it happened, right? You know, and preventing that from happening. I don't know, man. But that was my biggest thing I wanted to talk to the DA about. I feel like it was a big failure on the DA's part, also my defense lawyer's part. I'm upset about it. I'm upset at the VA, and I'm sure, like, you know, the Navy base is extremely upset as well, obviously, but they probably blame more me on that one. I don't think they really know that all the different pieces that were involved to get me to that day, that point in time where they were under attack, basically, you know? So, that's kind of it, I guess. I think. Oh, well, I guess, do you know, you're not familiar, you're not a lawyer, you said, right?
Correct.
But are you familiar with, like, statutes of limitations on these cases? Like, for having a judge reviewing, or?
Well, once, and I did look at, you know, I found your case and what the outcome was and everything. And at the point that it's concluded, the plea was done, the probation's over, the case is closed. At that point, there is no vehicle for a review beyond that.
Okay.
On it. You know, any
even if I think that the DEA was negligent, or
yeah. I mean, once it's closed, the time that those things come up would be while the case is still open and active.
I know, and that's how it's like they rush things through, and then I'm also still in the VA system, medicated and fogged up. Now that I'm clear, it's too late. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Now, I told my attorney I don't necessarily want it expunged because that would detract from my wife's experience and my daughter's experience. It doesn't do victims justice, right? Like, even though I feel like I was a victim myself, it happened, and it's a record of, I don't know. Yeah, you know, I don't know. My biggest concern, like I said, is trying to help raise awareness about these issues to avoid a potential worst case scenario. And it sounds like everyone kind of made their getaways, you know? That's what it feels like, you know? I don't know. Do you do vet court? Does the DA participate in that?
There is a DA that participates in that. Of course, Judge Sanchez now runs that court. Judge Cerny did, and I think Judge Sanchez does now, who is a veteran. He's a Marine Corps veteran. And I'm not sure if Judge Cerny was or not. I don't know his.
Who was the judge in this one?
I don't know who the judge was, but now it wouldn't have been one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Because typically I think that gets assigned after a case is done or in the process.
Oh, okay.
Of the thing.
Okay. Oh, yeah, weird situation. Like I said, it was, if I look back on it, I almost wish I had gone to prison, you know, because it would have prevented a lot more abuse and trauma and a lot of other stuff. But hindsight, and you never know, it could have been completely worse. Who knows? Who knows? I appreciate your time.
You are welcome.
And thanks for, would you please relay that message, though, to the district attorney, and know that I'm trying to advocate for victims as well, and also help people, keep the community safer. I don't think they want drugged up veterans running around
Absolutely.
hurting people, right? Driving, committing crimes, and I'm a perfect case. I'm a perfect case for, like the systemic negligence that could happen and end up being like a really bad situation. So if they would like to talk or get more details about different events and all that stuff, I'm willing to talk.
Sure.
But ultimately to help try and fix potential issues. I don't know, maybe it's not an issue anymore. Maybe people just get it, maybe I'm the only one. I don't know.
Doubt that.
I appreciate your time though.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm gonna end this right now.